Police power is immediate power. It's right now. Do what I told you to do, right now, or else. I decide what happens next.
Well, Yance, the title, Power,
Yeah.
I think immediately right there it's signaling, okay, we are going to reframe the understanding of what the purpose of police is. You could have called it police, you could have called it any number of things, but calling it power is sort of a declaration right there of what this critique that you're going to offer.
Yeah. I wanted the framing of the film to be really clear so that folks who bought a ticket would know what they were coming to see. But also the analysis of policing through the lens of the power that they hold and the power that they've accumulated over time isn't one that we've necessarily seen before. And we've seen a lot of documentaries specifically that look at the role of police in our society, that are verite films that maybe follow police as they do their jobs, but very few films that take a 30,000-foot view on the institution. And that's actually the point of this film, was to get up out of the current debate about whose life matters more and to really look at the institution and how it came to essentially be what it is today.
Both the LA Times and the New York Times commented, I think in the headline or in the body of their reviews, of it's driven by fury. And I wonder what you thought about that.
Isn't that curious?
I found it curious.
Perhaps what people are picking up on in Power is the fury of the institution, as opposed to my personal fury as a filmmaker. Because my take on this topic is driven by an inquiry, right? I want to know more about how we got to this particular place. But am I furious? No. I'm curious, absolutely. But it's not driven by my anger. If anything, it's driven by the anger of the institution outward toward the people that it's ostensibly meant to protect.
Part of the backdrop to the film, as I think about it, is, wow, we're in this extraordinary time culturally and politically, where basic rights that we thought were enshrined somewhere in the Constitution are being open to question, including the 14th Amendment, which was ostensibly supposed to resolve questions of citizenship.
Yes.
Because enslaved people had no rights, had no citizenship rights. But the broader context, I think, your film really gets into is that Black people historically have never been given full rights or full citizenship. It's always contingent.
It is always contingent. And I think that in terms of the 14th Amendment, it's really important to remember that during Reconstruction, what happened is that Black men in the South were given the right to vote. And then politicians in the South realized that there were many more Black men in the South than they were necessarily happy with. And so part of how Reconstruction began to be dialed back and essentially undone was to remove, and obviously, I mean, it goes without question, Black women were not given the right to vote. Right? Black men during Reconstruction had been given the right to vote, which resulted in actually integrated, bodies of government across the South. And then a couple of folks were like, we're looking at the demographic numbers here, and this is not going to work out in our favor, so let's just take that back. And I think that we're looking at that again. Like, let's just take this back. Like the question of birthright citizenship. Let's put a little asterisk next to that so that we can determine who we want to be a citizen and who we don't. It's amazing how often we repeat these things, right? American history is built on cycles of repetition, including what we're seeing now on college campuses, but also in terms of the proposed legislation or laws or regulations about citizenship. It applied to Irish, Italian, and Greek immigrants in the mid 19th century, and it is coming around again.
No, I think that was, well, there's so many revelations in the film. That was really revelatory to me. I wanted to ask you about this extraordinary archive that you found for the film, and including one I've had the benefit and privilege of watching the film several times now, so I'm struck by something different each time. But you have this incredible series of clips from the Police film, which I guess was from 1970, and there's Ben Gazzara in retrospect, I really feel embarrassed for Ben Gazzara to have done this. But there's this fascinating thing where he's going to explain, what the purpose of the police are, and it's clearly meant as a defense.
Yeah.
And the analogy of the ants. And so what does he say about the ant? Oh, we got an invader ant. And he characterizes it that the police ants are trying to prevent this other ant from getting into their anthill home. Again, it's all about property.
Yes.
This is the foundation of what is being protected.
Yes. There's a line drawn beyond which you shall not pass. Sorry, I just did a Lord of the Rings. I just did a Gandalf, which tells you, sorry, a little bit of
Wise man. So
yeah, wise man Gandalf, right? There's a line in the sand beyond which you shall not pass. That was the origin of policing. It was about property. It was about the boundaries within which people were allowed to move and the boundaries beyond which people were not allowed to move. The police film with Ben Gazzara as the narrator was an enormous surprise to us. But we also found, material that had been produced by police that had Peter Falk and other celebrities in it. His presence alone is not the most remarkable thing, as is the argument that this policing apparatus is almost, someone else made this argument, not me, I forget the person who made the point, but it's almost like genetic. It's almost something that comes out of evolution as opposed to something that's created by systems and structures in the mid-19th century.
There's a critical moment in the film that you and I have talked about before as well, of the we, the questioning of the we.
Yes.
And it's such a vital issue because, again, I think most people don't think about when we say we as a society. That is assuming that we all have an equal stake in it and have been offered equal benefits, equal, if you will, citizenship rights. But that is a mistaken assumption.
Indeed, it assumes that we've been offered equal benefits, equal participation, equal standing, equal say, equal rights to vote, and equal rights to the sort of things like very basic like public education, to healthcare. The we is an extraordinarily broad category that breaks down sort of category by category when you're thinking about how each community in this country interacts with police. And then when you ask yourself that question, who is the we, you begin to realize that there are multiple we's. There are multiple societies with whom the police have different relations. And your relationship to police in your community is going to be very different than my relationship to police in my community, which will be very different from the next person. Allowing ourselves to say that exists without necessarily feeling attacked by the admission or guilty because that's true, I think is one of the important things. And I think it's actually necessary to understand where you are situated in relation to policing. And if policing is working for you, that's great. But policing is not working for many, many people. And I think it's important that everyone look at policing through its sort of prism effect on our society.
I wanted to ask you about Charlie Adams. He's such a remarkable individual in your film, and I don't know how others felt watching it, but that he seemed absolutely torn by his function as a police officer, and yet he's a man of color. And he talks about making an arrest and somebody other officer smacks him in the head with a flashlight.
Right.
And so it kind of evokes that question of what is the ultimate loyalty of people who are in uniform, even if they're people of color, are they more loyal to, blue?
The institution.
Yeah.
Are they black or are they blue?
Yeah.
Is essentially the question. I think that what happens with Charlie Adams and what we see with Charlie Adams is the limits of one person's aspiration and desire to do things in the community, because he's confined by the parameters of the institution in which he works. right? So he wants to do something to prevent youth felonies of these carjackings, for example. But the only thing that he has at his disposal is the county homeschool, which essentially ships kids off to, penitentiary-like conditions to supposedly be straightened out so they can be returned to the community without any kind of rehabilitation. Charlie is an incredible character, an incredible person, because he's trying. He has remained committed to the community in which he grew up for the entirety of his career. And yet, for all of his commitment, he can only do so much. And without a reimagining of what policing means in Minneapolis, and without a reimagining of what policing means in the United States, there can be as many Charlie Adams as there are, fish in the sea. And they will not be able to move the institution of policing toward a definition of community safety that the people in the north side of Minneapolis would recognize as something that benefits them.
Let's all thank Yance for the director and producer of Power.
Thank you all for coming.